I've been traveling around different cities in this country to visit different clients and contractors and subcontractors to talk about NEC. One thing I realized is that sometimes we have got some confusion or we are struggling with the roles and responsibilities of a supervisor. What is the question? The question is, can the supervisor instruct the contractor to carry out tests and inspections not stated in the scope? That is the question. And in fact, if you are getting through the accreditation journey of this NEC4 ECC, project manager accreditation, that may probably be one of the trickiest questions that may be in your mind when you are getting through that journey. So let's talk about that. And by the way, if you need support in accreditations, feel free to reach out, ask me questions, send me direct LinkedIn messages. I'm more than happy to answer. Nowadays, it's almost about hobby now. And it's all in my head. I can easily answer your questions if you send me emails. So let's go for it. Can the supervisor instruct the contractor to carry out tests and inspection not required by the scope? The answer is no. Let me explain. The starting point is the responsibilities of a contractor. What is the main responsibility of the contractor? The main responsibility of the contractor is, under clause 20.1, the contractor is to provide the works in accordance with the scope. Meaning, if the scope says something, then the contractor needs to do something. If the scope does not say something, then the contractor does not need to do something. Unless the scope has been changed. Then who can change the scope now? Of course, it's the project manager. The project manager may instruct the contractor and change the scope. Which clause? Clause 14.3. So now if there is a project manager instruction under clause 14.3, then the scope will be changed. If the scope has been changed, then the contractor needs to carry out, for example, some additional works. And that is the whole idea here. Now, if you are saying the supervisor may instruct the contractor to carry out some works, including tests and inspections, not stated in the scope, then that is a direct contradiction with the original principle of the main responsibility of the contractor according to clause 20.1 and the authority of the project manager to instruct the contractor and change the scope under clause 14.3. Why? Because on one hand, you are saying the contractor is to provide the works in accordance with the scope, which can be changed by the project manager only. And on the other hand, you are saying the supervisor can instruct the contractor to do something which is not stated in the scope, and that scope has not been changed. And that is a direct contradiction in there. And therefore, in the NEC ECC contract, you will not see a clause saying the supervisor may instruct the contractor to carry out the test and inspection not stated in the scope. That is the reason why. Then some of you, when you read a certain clause, that clause is talking about searching for defect, then that is where the confusion comes. Which clause? Clause 43.1. If you read clause 43.1 and you go down to the last bullet point of that clause, it says something that the supervisor may require the contractor to do the test and inspection which the scope does not require. Then what is happening here? Now let me explain. When we read the contract, we need to read the contract from top to bottom. We need to read the contract like as a whole. For example, if we read clause 43.1, we need to read that clause as a whole, not just the third bullet point like that. So that clause 43.1, if you read the first sentence, it says, until defect date, the supervisor may instruct the contractor to search for a defect. What is that instruction? That instruction is an instruction to search for defects. And only under that scenario, under the instruction to search for defect, we allow the supervisor to do a lot of things. Whether it is stated in the scope It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Why? Because it makes sense that way. It makes sense that way. If the supervisor is to search for defect, then there will be some specific reason or some specific circumstances which require that search for defect. And therefore, the contract intends to allow the supervisor to do a lot of things. For example, dismantling something. For example, uncovering something, opening up the ground. Do we expect the scope to say something like that? No. And in fact, the contract allows the supervisor to uncover something, to dismantle something in the scenario of a search for defect. Similarly, it tries to cover other tests and inspections which are not stated in the scope in the scenario of a search for defect. Only under the circumstance of a search for defect can the supervisor include in the search that some tests and inspection which are not stated in the scope have to be carried out by the contractor. And that is the whole idea here. So what is happening here? If the scope doesn't mention some tests and inspections, the contractor does not need to do it. And the supervisor has got no authority to instruct the contractor to do something which is not in the scope. That is the first point. But things will happen. If things happen, then the supervisor may search for defect. Then under that scenario, a search for defect will allow the supervisor to do a lot of things, including some of the tests and inspections which are not required by the scope, to make that search for defect to be meaningful. It has nothing to do with whether the contractor has got the responsibility to fulfill the scope. It is about the authority of the supervisor to search for a defect. In order to give that effect, the supervisor may instruct the contractor to search for defect, and the searching may include a lot of activities, including the tests and inspections not stated in the scope. So I hope that is clear right now. If you still need clarification, feel free to reach out. And that is one of the trickiest questions that you may have got in the accreditation journey. If you need help, once again, feel free to reach out. It's all in my head, and sometimes I can answer your question like right away if you send me something, and it helps me too. So sometimes I need to understand what you do not understand. What is the major pain point when you are the practicing project managers outside? And if you're struggling with some contract-specific issues, however, I may not be able to answer that like right away because I need to read your contract like specifically, and we need to talk in that sense. Okay, I hope that is useful for you. And if you have any problems, feel free to reach out, and I will try to talk about that on this YouTube channel if it is appropriate. Thank you very much.